Hello friends and welcome to the ADHD workshop. My name is Dean. Today's video I'm going to be calling Watches, Music, and Why Your ADHD Student Can't Get Their Homework Done. Now that I've got the shop cleared out, I'm focusing back in on some of my hobbies. If you haven't seen it, the video I made just prior to this is the total transformation of what was a catastrophe into a very functional, organized shop space. It took me about 3 years to get it unorganized, and it took me about 4 days of working long days to get it back into shape. Now I'm ready to start doing some of the things that I enjoy doing. So to give you a little background and to set up this video, during COVID, I was kind of bored and I was consuming a lot of content. I love to know how things work. When I was a kid, I loved ripping things apart. If they were broken, 100%, mom had no problem with us ripping things apart. I even ripped apart some things that did work that didn't work when I was done because I just wanted to know so badly how they worked. We didn't have the internet, so it was all hands-on. Well, I watched some videos of a guy repairing antique clocks, and it was absolutely fascinating to me. It's just really cool how everything works. So I bought the courses and I did a clock repair. This one is TikTok Productions, but I did a clock repair coursework. And in there, they had watch repair too, which was fascinating. There were old wooden clocks. I mean, this whole thing, you guys, it was absolutely fascinating for me. Something I really, really enjoyed. Well, now that I'm back at it, I've been watching a lot of watch content. I've been seeing a lot of watch content. And watches, believe it or not, are actually a little more simple than a clock in that they just have a time train. There's only time and sometimes a date. Some can get extremely complicated, but for the most part, it's simple. Clocks generally have a chime side and they have a time side. So there's more gears and everything's kind of clunky and there's a lot of crossed levers and bars. Clocks or watches a little more straightforward. So there's a local auction place. I saw a lot of watches that look good. There were 16. I'm trying to find watches with mechanical movements. And so I went ahead and I bought a lot of watches for $40. Okay, so here's a little video of the watches that I purchased. And I'll kind of walk you through what I've got here. So here at the top of the table, these watches up here are all battery operated watches. And people who are into the mechanical watches, they're kind of snobs about those kind of watches. They're not so much into this type of watch. So out of the 16 watches, these are the bezels, or the part where the watch is actually inset and displayed. The dial would be viewed through the windows here. These two were mechanical movements. Okay. Now before I get to the mechanical movements down here, this is one that I thought was going to be mechanical. See if I can get a good shot. There we go. It's a Bulova watch, and it turned out to be a battery-operated one. Well, as I was looking at all these battery-operated watches, I noticed that most of them on the front say quartz. They're quartz watches, and I started wondering, well, what is this? Why do they call them quartz watches? It has to do on this watch with this little spot. Boy, that's still a little. There we go. That's better focus. Right above the word Swiss, there's this little barrel right here. Okay, and you can see in relationship to my thumb, that would probably be, I don't know, maybe at the most a 1/4 inch, maybe plus, 3/8 of an inch long and very small. I mean, inside this, you'd be lucky if you could fit a grain of rice. Okay, so not what I was hoping for. I was looking for more mechanical movements. And I'm going to be panning down here, but this silver barrel is going to come back into play here in just a second. Okay, so here are two mechanical movements. This one here is kind of an off-brand, no name. This little part right here that it oscillates back and forth really fast is what is known as the balance. Looks like I'm going to need a visit from my pug. Wants to see what's going on. This looks pretty large on the screen, but it is actually a tiny watch movement. It's a lady's movement. I'll show you here in a minute with some scale. Now here's another one. This is a Bulova movement, and it's also from what I believe to be a lady's watch. If not, it's a very small-faced men's watch. And I have I've got a lot of work to do on this in terms of knowing about the watch, where it came from. I just barely broke it out of its case today. But, you know, you can see it ticking away here. They are fascinating. That one is actually running pretty sluggish. Now here's some coins for scale. That quarter, maybe slightly larger than the Bulova. And this other one here, I'm going to drop a dime next to it. Okay, and I'm just going to show you. Okay, this dime would probably cover the entire watch movement. And then this little screw right here, this is called the winding stem that's nearest the dime, or the crown with the winding stem. And that first screw that we run into, that is actually smaller than the date numbers on the dime. So it requires special tools. You can see there's beautiful jewel here. That jewel is actually a synthetic sapphire, and I'll get into that in another video. But these are the movements I was looking for, but it started making me wonder, why is everybody down on these quartz watches or the battery operated watches? Why are they not as popular? They actually keep better time than a mechanical movement. They're less expensive. There's less moving parts. There's less things to break. They need less service. They're just not that popular. Well, that sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So I started thinking, how do these things work? Well, it turns out the reason they call them a quartz watch is because they have inside them a little quartz crystal that is actually, literally, a tuning fork. So tuning forks, they use these in medicine. Some people use them in music. If you tap them, they vibrate at a specific frequency. So this one here, it says it's 256 hertz. That one will vibrate 256 hertz. Is actually the note C on the piano, okay? Or in really any instrument. This one is an A, and it would actually oscillate at 440 hertz. They call it A440. It's actually the note that everything else is scaled off of. So here is an actual quartz crystal. It's what was inside the silver tube. Like I say, about the size of a grain of rice. And you can see the quartz crystal and then some metal banding that's linked through to an electromagnet, and the electromagnet is driven with the battery that makes this little tiny crystal vibrate really fast. How fast, you ask? Great question. 32,768 oscillations per second. Okay, it's going very fast. And I thought, that's really interesting. Why does it need to go that fast? What I found out is 32,768 is the product, mathematically, of 2 raised to the 15th power. Okay, so why would they do that? You know, if you're trying to get down to 1 second, why would you go this way? Well, what they do is they take this 32,768 and they run it back through a series of electronic gates that cuts the amplitude in half each time until they get all the way back to 1. Now, they can't do an oscillation or a tuning fork with 1 beat per second because it would have to be massive for 1. It's such a slow vibration, but this system works. Well, why did they use this high of a frequency? It turns out that human hearing can go all the way up to 20,000 hertz. Okay, now, average adults hear between 15 and 17,000 hertz, and so they ran that frequency high enough that you wouldn't be able to hear your watch humming. Then I started thinking, if it was humming, what frequency is this? And that's when I actually discovered that it is a C in the musical scale, right? Any of these oscillations per second would produce a C note. Now, you wouldn't hear them below a certain range because our hearing doesn't go that low, but the piano goes from 32 hertz to 4,096 hertz. Okay, all of these notes in green, every one of those would be a C note. Okay, and I just thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. I like music. And then I thought, well, I can't hear it, but can my dog hear it? So I looked up a bunch of, how does hearing range for different animals? Dogs could definitely hear this if you put it near enough. I mean, if it was amplified, they would definitely hear it. Cats could hear it. Cows could hear it. Horses can hear it. A bat could definitely hear it, even probably at the volume that it's at. And a beluga whale, they can hear up to sounds as high or frequencies as fast as 123,000 hertz. So 120,000 oscillations per second, that is a sound so high, it would be so far undetectable for humans, but kind of crazy. And for elephants, they, like humans, they wouldn't be able to hear this. Then I started thinking, well, if they were to create a piano that had that note on it, how big would that make a piano? Well, a standard piano has 88 keys. That would be about 48 inches wide, so 4 feet wide. Then I looked at the average width of piano keys, and if you went all the way up to this one, you'd need to add 3 additional octaves. It would give you 124 keys. 124 keys would be 67 inches, 67.6, or about 5 foot, 7.5 inches wide. Then I started thinking, well, would I even be able to span that far? Well, average men have a 5'9" wingspan. So we would be able to reach most of the keys. For ladies, 5'4". So you'd have to slide yourself and you wouldn't be able to touch the bottom key and the top key at the same time if you're average. What's the point of all this? This is how the ADHD brain works. So when you're doing a task, when you're doing homework, in this case, this is stuff that I really wanted to understand, so I didn't mind diving into it. Mind you, this all happened on Saturday. Today's Monday. So I've been thinking about this for the last 2 days. And if you're a student and you're sitting in class and you catch some kind of a distraction, you could be this far down the rabbit hole before you're able to focus back on what it is that you're doing. So it's just a little bit of a window, in my opinion, of how the ADHD brain works. Now, for me, absolutely fascinating. And what I learned is quartz watches are awesome. And I'm understanding a little bit more why I had a hard time staying on task as a student. Friends, I hope you're having an amazing day. I appreciate you joining me for the video. If you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe. And check back with me soon. I'll post additional content.